What's up, everybody? Welcome back to a very special episode of Talking Whiskey. We are your hosts. I am Josh Daniels.
And I'm Colton Bingham. Let's drink some whiskey.
There is Drink Some Whiskey at Chattanooga Whiskey. Hit that intro. Woo, all right, Colton. As you can see, we are not in the Talking Whiskey studios. We are at our Graceland. This is downtown Chattanooga at the Chattanooga Whiskey Distillery. And man, we are loving it. We're having a great time. This is Tim. He is the whiskey man. So Timmy, take it away.
All right, well, appreciate you guys having me here. Love what you guys are doing. It's good to actually get together and talk about some whiskey and get to know each other in person. So we got a lineup here. We've got our what's known as our flagship, which is Chattanooga Whiskey 1816 Reserve. It's our 90 proof traditional bourbon whiskey. We've got our cask strength version of that, which is an unfiltered barrel proof at 113.6 proof. I know these guys are excited about that. Who wouldn't be? And then we brought 2 experimentals with us today. We've actually released 10 experimental batches out of our experimental distillery, also in downtown, over the last year. And we brought our batch 004, which is our Scottish style high malt. And we also brought our batch 009, which is our Tennessee double malt. And super complex stuff, minimum of 4 grains and 3 malts in every recipe. Quite a bit different than what we have here.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Well, you know, Colton and I, we're big Chattanooga whiskey fans. If anybody has seen the show, I mean, they've seen a lot.
Always repping, I love it.
Yeah, man, absolutely, absolutely. They've seen a lot of Chattanooga whiskey memorabilia every single show. So what we don't know how you came, Tim, from being cool guy Tim to being Chattanooga whiskey.
I haven't quite made it to cool guy Tim yet.
Oh, no.
For the record, so yeah. So man, it all started with an idea that really formed because of the history of whiskey in Chattanooga pre-Prohibition. So from 1866 to 1915, most people don't know that Chattanooga was one of the largest distilling towns in North America.
Oh, wow.
We stumbled upon all that history back in 2011 and immediately launched the company on Facebook, of all places, with no plan, no product. Just a couple of guys that didn't know what they were doing and had an idea.
Wow.
It took off from there, but we had laws to change because we couldn't distill here. It was illegal to distill in Chattanooga. Most people didn't realize that it was actually illegal to distill in the majority of the state of Tennessee, outside of the few distilleries that were there at the time: Jack Daniel's, George Dickel, Pritchard's. So anyways, we went to work and in 2011 with a campaign called the Vote Whiskey Campaign.
Right.
Lobbied for 2 years, and Governor Haslam signed the bill in, House Bill 102, in spring of 2013, and then we built the experimental distillery in 2015, which just happened to be also, the House Bill 102, 102 years after the last distillery made juice in Chattanooga.
That's fake.
That's also why all of our experimental batches are 102 proof. So.
Okay. Very cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's neat.
Yeah, definitely. Colton and I, we've been to the experimental distillery and we love it. I mean,
Appreciate that.
Man, we have a great time there. It's definitely our favorite place to go in Chattanooga.
Oh, that's cool.
So any guys check it out. It's across from the Choo Choo.
Yep.
Just go in there. I mean, they get a nice little cool tour. They still give a flat of whiskey at the end of the tour. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that we're super proud of is it's grain to glass, really, right? You learn about history. Yeah. We make all of our experimentals there. We age all of our experimentals there, and then we serve our experimentals at the bar in the flight. So
yeah,
you don't get no fresher than that.
Yeah, that's super cool. $20, right, for a tour?
It's actually $12.
$12.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to after tax, 13. So we got real production happening right here in the midst of our presence.
That's fine. The future of Chattanooga whiskey.
Well, that's a really good question. That's what the experimental distillery has been all about. Is over the last 3.5 years, it's been about establishing who we're going to be in the future. You know, we've been selling this award-winning bourbon. You know, it's a traditional mash bill. It is, you know, 1816 Reserve and 1816 Cask. It's the bourbon that changed century-old laws for Chattanooga whiskey.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't be here without it, and we want to honor that. But we also wanted to be, you know, something that was more differentiated than that. Something that's, if we can push the boundaries of complexity and of quality, you know, something that's higher quality, you know, we want to do that. So we hired our head distiller before we built the experimental distillery. His name's Grant Mccracken. Grant was a professional brewer for a long time before he came into Chattanooga Whiskey. And he and I got together and we decided that we wanted it to be a malt-forward bourbon whiskey. We've been selling a traditional bourbon whiskey, but we want to push the boundaries of malt in bourbon, okay? Great whiskey comes from great beer. You cannot make great whiskey without great beer. So, focusing on the grain, the recipe, focusing on the time of fermentation, you know, instead of doing a traditional 3-day fermentation, doing a 7-day fermentation. So there's a lot of complexity that comes throughout the process, and we really focus on all of that. I mean, we have a Solera barrel process, which we're one of the only whiskeys in the country that has a Solera barrel process.
That is awesome.
So all of this, basically over the period of 3.5 years, really focusing on malt forward and longer fermentations, we coined and trademarked this phrase called Tennessee high malt. Okay, so it is straight bourbon whiskey, but it's our own unique style of straight bourbon whiskey from Tennessee, and we're proud of our Tennessee roots. So Tennessee high malt is what we call it. After 120 experimental barrels in production, our team got together and we selected our favorite recipe out of all of those different barrels, and that was barrel number 91.
Oh, that's awesome.
And
That's awesome.
yeah, man, super exciting. We were pumped about barrel 91 because it took the best of 1816 Reserve and 1816 Cask, and it expounded on it.
Yeah.
Minimum of 4 grains instead of 3 grains. And of those 4 grains, 3 of them are malted. So you've got majority of corn because we're bourbon after all.
Right.
And then we kept with the rye, but instead of raw rye, we went with malted rye.
Wow.
And then instead of just a traditional malt barley, we went with 2 specialty malts, caramel malt barley and honey malt barley. Then we built our riverfront headquarters, which is where we are today. It's 50,000 square feet. We can produce over 2,500 barrels a year.
Yeah.
And this is where we make Tennessee high malt. This is where we are producing the future of Chattanooga whiskey.
Yeah, and it's a bright future. I mean,
And we're
really.
pumped about it.
Very bright.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean,
Appreciate
well, what do you got for us today?
Well, so I think naturally we want to start off with what's been our flagship, right? And because once you know, this is a 90 proof, 1816 Reserve is a 90 proof straight bourbon whiskey. This has been Solera barrel finished, so it's gone through our Solera barrel here at Riverfront. And then we want to step up from there to the cask strength.
Okay.
And cask strength is what we call unfiltered barrel proof. It's one of the few unfiltered cask strengths. So you guys may have heard of chill filtered before. We don't do that because it actually takes away from the flavor profile.
Yeah.
We do non-chilled filtration,
Okay.
which just keeps the char out of the bottles. But with cask, we actually take it a step further. Instead of running through what's typically called it's a 5 micron filtration, so it allows no char to pass through. In cask, we run it through a mesh filtration that allows some char sediment to pass through.
Nice.
And really enhances the overall flavor and texture of the bourbon.
Yeah, that's where you get that color from. Look how dark it is.
Yep, yep. So you've
awesome,
got
man.
Solera barrel bourbon at 90 proof. You got an unfiltered cask strength bourbon at 113.6 proof. And then we want to step into our experimentals just because they are so complex and so different. And they are also 102 proof, so they are high proof. So it's great to really lay the foundation with a 90 proof straight bourbon whiskey.
Absolutely. Great. Now you said the Solera barrel. For those that don't know, what is a Solera barrel?
Yeah. There's a lot of jargon that we have to explain on a daily basis. So what's cool about the Solera barrel and explaining it, if you're not sure what it is, we do have a little drawing there on the side. So the Solera barrel finishing, what that allows, it's one recipe, okay? You're not going to blend recipes together, because if you blend recipes together, it's a blended whiskey. We don't do a blended whiskey, we're a straight bourbon whiskey, all right? So With Solera barrel, it is a finishing technique where it goes into, ours is a 4,000 gallon wooden barrel, white oak, just like the barrel that it was aged in. Okay, so it does have straight bourbon, so it does have to age for a minimum of 2 years in a 53 gallon barrel. Okay, we use a number 4 char on our 1816 Reserve and 1816 cask, so it'll age for a minimum of 2 years. We have some of our 1816 barrels are a maximum of 10 years, okay?
Wow, really?
So this Solera barrel actually allows both your barrels that are closer to 2 years and your barrels that are 10 years to commingle and live together in a 4,000 gallon white oak barrel before they're bottled, okay? And what that allows is for the complexities of whatever barrel, they age, differently, right? So they develop new complexities as they age, and based on their age, based on the environment that they age in, and the Solera barrel allows those to mingle together before they're bottled, and that barrel never runs dry.
Wow.
So you can imagine if you run one 10-year-old barrel through there, in theory, there's always a piece of that 10-year-old barrel in that Solera barrel before it's bottled. So it's just about complexity and consistency from batch to batch.
That is awesome, man. That is so cool. Great art. Well, all right, man. My very favorite. This is the whiskey that started talking whiskey.
Yep. Everybody here, this whiskey is on their shelf. I guarantee it.
Absolutely, yeah. This Chattanooga Whiskey 1816 Reserve. This is what started talking whiskey right here. So, Tim, take it away.
It's also the whiskey that changed century-old laws, so we're definitely proud of it. All right.
Sticking it
a little
to the
bit
man.
For
man, absolutely.
And then I have to partake.
Got to.
I mean, I don't remember the last time I didn't partake. So, gentlemen.
All right. Well, what's the smell? Can you walk me through the smell?
Yep. So what we have here in 1816 Reserve and 1816 Cask, but it's a 90 proof straight bourbon whiskey. Okay. So when people are often describing whiskey, you hear a lot of terms like smooth. That's probably the number one, right? Term is smooth. That's cool. Honestly, I don't really care how you describe your whiskey.
Right.
You hear caramel, you hear vanilla, you hear wood or oak. You get the wood and oak out of it. 1816 Reserve is an award-winning bourbon from the San Francisco Spirits competition. So it is a good bourbon by all standards. And at 90 proof, it's not too light. I mean, I personally can't stand a thin bourbon. I like stuff that's thicker in texture.
Good
You'll notice that Chattanooga Whiskey is going to be a floor of 90 proof at all times. Our experimental 102, our cask 113.6. So we are typically a higher proof bourbon, and that's because it's fuller flavor. It's got some texture to it, and so that's what we like about all of our bourbons. And for a traditional straight bourbon, you do get the caramels and the vanillas, and you're going to taste the oak. But what's cool about this is the Solera barrel finish process too. You're going to get a little more complexity out of this because you've had this has bits of 10-year-old in it, and 6-year-old and 2-year-old, and awesome. Same recipe again, straight bourbon whiskey, and not a blended whiskey. But that Solera barrel, I think, really enhances the complexity of the product. But again, it's a traditional straight bourbon whiskey, aside from the Solera barrel finishing process. And so you get a lot of traditional notes like you would get out of a lot of other great bourbon whiskeys out there. So at the end of the day, this is a great flagship. It's a great go-to. Yeah. If you want to drink your whiskey with ginger ale, hell yeah, go for it. It's this is a good bourbon to do it at a $30 price point. It's not an inexpensive bourbon, but it's not a pricey bourbon either, right? So I feel like this is kind of this right here is your utility player.
Yeah,
so
it's every man's bourbon.
Absolutely. It's an award-winning utility player. You can it's super trusty. So
your daily driver.
Yeah. Cheers, gentlemen.
Cheers.
All right.
That's good.
That never gets old.
That's the taste of home. That's the taste of home right there.
That's the dynamo of Dixie, guys.
That is. Absolutely, man. Okay, so, all right, if you don't,
You okay?
I'm sorry.
Awkward hug.
There you go,
Actually,
yeah.
in the middle.
Yeah, we'll just
where did that come from? What are those guys doing?
You got a Tim sandwich.
First sip,
over
and
here.
we're all in, man. We're all in.
The Tim sandwich.
Yeah.
Great whiskey. I mean, what's some tasting notes that the master here has?
Well, definitely not the master. But it's the mash bill in this thing is 75% corn, 21% rye, 4% malted barley. And so that corn is going to provide the sweetness. Okay, it's a nice base. It's going to work really well with the oak. The rye content is pretty high at 21%, which is so you can call it a high-rye bourbon. Okay. We even tell like some of our friends that enjoy a rye whiskey more than a bourbon whiskey might gravitate towards this because of the rye content in it. Okay. And rye is a spicy grain. So you're going to get, whereas wheat is very soft, rye is spicy. Okay. We like what rye offers to bourbon because it offers some additional complexity with the spice. I would say a rye bourbon is more complex than a wheated bourbon.
Sure.
I agree.
And then we've got a little bit of malt barley in there, which traditionally has been used for the cooking and fermentation process because it helps break down enzymes. So,
oh man, that's awesome. That's great. Well, okay. Well, what else? What is next? What is next?
All right. Well, after this, man, we're going after 1816 casks. So it's the natural step in the progression. So.
Absolutely.
Let's do it.
So what I like about 1816 casks personally is there are a lot of cask strength bourbons out there that are at very high price points. Typically, you're looking at well north of $60 a bottle.
Yeah.
And with ours, we wanted to keep it reasonable. We wanted to keep it attainable by the everyday person. I mean, at 113.6 proof, which is really, it's essentially barrel strength. It is cask strength, why we call it cask. But at a mid $40 price point, no matter where you are in any of our markets, is typically in the mid 40s. Mm-hmm. That is a super affordable price point, and it is also award-winning. This actually won Best Small Batch Bourbon in the International Whiskey Competition. Yeah. So it's an award-winning bourbon. I would, put it up against any competitor of the cask strength category.
Absolutely.
And we're super proud of it. Same recipe: 75% corn, 21% rye, 4% malted barley. But you're going to notice a pretty big difference in texture in 113.6 proof over 90 proof, and it's one of the reasons that I love it so much. Is it's essentially the whiskey that it's unfiltered too, right? So it's essentially the whiskey you're drinking out of the barrel.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
so if you just stick your head in a barrel and come up with a mouthful, you got cask.
You got cask.
That's right.
So let's get to enjoying this.
All right.
Right?
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's get in there.
Ooh, that's good.
It's amazing.
It's a little more robust of a flavor.
Absolutely.
Than the.
It is thicker, right?
It's
like
thicker.
as soon as it goes in your mouth, you can tell that there's more texture to it.
But the smell of this, I do smell a little caramel, more caramel than the reserve.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's so a lot of the caramel flavoring comes, most of it comes from the barrel, actually. Okay. So you got to think the barrel's charred or it's toasted and charred on the inside, and it caramelizes the wood. There's natural sugars in there.
Cool.
And so when that whiskey goes in during the summertime, it expands, and in the wintertime it contracts. It pulls those sugars and that char into the whiskey. And it caramelizes the product, gives it 100% of its color, gives it a lot of its flavor. Yeah. So when you're talking about a cask strength bourbon, obviously you're gonna get a lot more of that barrel flavor, and so you're getting a lot more of that caramel flavor in here.
Yeah, great.
That's so
That's
cool.
why I like it so much.
That is so awesome. This is great, man.
This place is not air conditioned either, guys. So we got a straight on whiskey fueled man sauna happening here.
We're sweating out every single sip that we take out of every one of our brews.
It's going quick.
It's pretty hot in here. It's pretty hot in here. But hey, Tim, that is all the time we got for this week's episode of Talking Whiskey. We will be back next week, folks, to wrap it up and taste experimental batch number 4 and experimental batch number 9. They are excellent whiskeys. And if you like what you see, please hit that like button and smash that subscribe button to see more. And all the comments in the comment section are really appreciated below. And Tim, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you very much for let's come out here and do this.
It's my pleasure to have you guys here, and hope everybody gets to enjoy a little bit of Chattanooga whiskey in their life sometime soon.
And we will see you guys next week.